In the shadows of World War II, a group of American artists and soldiers devised an audacious plan to mislead the German forces into believing they faced a far larger, more formidable enemy. This is the story of the Ghost Army, a covert operation that utilized inflatable tanks, sound effects, and deceptive strategies to turn the tide of battle without a single shot being fired. While some characters in this narrative may be fictionalized, the extraordinary events and ingenuity of the time are firmly rooted in real history. Join us as we delve into the remarkable feats of creativity and deception that played a crucial role in a pivotal moment of the war. Subscribe to our channel for access to meticulously researched narratives that illuminate the untold stories of history. With a commitment to clarity and accuracy, we offer rare perspectives and regular uploads that engage and educate. Don't miss out on the history that shaped our world. Join us today. In the spring of 1944, the Allied forces were finalizing plans for the invasion of Europe, a bold initiative that would soon become known as Operation Overlord. Central to this strategy was the need for deception. The German forces had fortified their defenses along the Normandy coast, and the Allies required a means to mislead their adversaries regarding their true intentions. It was in this environment of subterfuge that a unique unit emerged: the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, more famously known as the Ghost Army. This unit comprised a diverse array of soldiers, painters, sound engineers, and even actors inspired by a vision of creative warfare. At the helm of this audacious endeavor was Ralph Ingersoll, an imaginative and determined soldier. Ingersoll understood that the success of D-Day hinged not solely on brute military strength, but also on the capacity to create convincing illusions. The Ghost Army's mission was to deceive the German forces into believing that Allied troops were positioned in locations where they were not. It would be a psychological operation unlike any seen before, blending art with warfare, and Ingersoll would soon call upon his compatriots to contribute to this theatrical ruse. The artists and engineers worked in a whirlwind of creativity, constructing inflatable tanks, artillery, and even trucks that could be transported easily to deceive enemy reconnaissance. These were no ordinary inflatables. They were crafted with meticulous attention to detail, painted to mimic the authentic camouflage patterns of real military vehicles. The men worked under the cover of darkness, knowing that their success depended on the element of surprise. Their creations were designed to withstand scrutiny from the air, where enemy planes would survey the landscape looking for signs of the impending invasion. Ironically, it was through art that these men would wage war. The visual deception extended beyond the latex and rubber figures. Sound technicians were recruited to create realistic auditory environments mimicking the sounds of an army in preparation. The creaks and clanks of vehicles being readied for deployment, the distant chatter of soldiers, and the booming sounds of artillery fire were all meticulously recorded and broadcast from hidden speakers. The cacophony would echo through the valleys, generating a sense of overwhelming presence where there was none. This multifaceted approach embodied the collaboration of various talents, each man lending a unique skill to the grand illusion. As the day of the invasion drew nearer, the Ghost Army undertook a series of daring missions behind enemy lines, orchestrating elaborate schemes to mislead the German forces. One notable operation occurred in the weeks leading up to D-Day, when the unit was assigned to create the illusion of an impending assault on the Pas-de-Calais region. While the Allies were preparing for the Normandy invasion, they sought to convince the German command that Calais was the main target. The placement of inflatable tanks in key locations, combined with sound effects of heavy machinery, led the Germans to allocate resources and troops to the area, thereby diluting their defensive posture elsewhere. The tension in the air was palpable as the Ghost Army embarked on these missions. Soldiers were acutely aware that their very survival hinged on the success of their carefully orchestrated deceptions. The German troops, often relying on rigid hierarchies and traditional military tactics, found themselves grappling with a form of warfare that seemed to defy their expectations. As reports of troop movements and the sounds of distant artillery reached their ears, German commanders were forced into a reactive stance, scrambling to reassess their strategies. The Ghost Army thus played a pivotal role, asserting the power of illusion over the hard realities of war. On June 6, 1944, the day of the Normandy invasion, the Ghost Army continued their operations, launching the greatest deception yet. While Allied forces stormed the beaches, the ghostly tank battalions remained in the shadows, casting an aura of invulnerability around the Allied effort. Their work was not without risk. The threat of discovery loomed large, and the soldiers knew that a single slip could expose their ruse. However, the thrill of their clandestine artistry fueled their resolve. The creation of believable facsimiles transformed them into actors in a high-stakes play, with the fate of countless soldiers resting on the believability of their performance. As the dust settled on the success of D-Day, the ingenuity of the Ghost Army became increasingly recognized. The deception had been so effective that many German commanders were left baffled, convinced that they faced far larger forces than actually existed. Ingersoll and his men had crafted a narrative of military might, a narrative that ultimately fed into the larger tapestry of war. The psychological impact of their operations could not be understated. They sowed seeds of doubt among the German ranks, allowing the Allied forces to secure footholds in Europe with unprecedented speed. Yet the story of the Ghost Army did not end with D-Day. Their creative warfare would find a renewed purpose in the months that followed, as the Allies continued their campaign across Europe. Each mission undertaken by the Ghost Army became a testament to the power of creativity in the face of overwhelming odds. In an era defined by industrial warfare, where the machinery of combat seemed to overshadow individual contributions, these artists and actors demonstrated that the human spirit, when coupled with imagination, could produce outcomes as impactful as any cannon fire or charge across the battlefield. Their legacy, though often obscured by the grandeur of the larger conflict, remains a striking reminder of the ingenuity that characterized this pivotal moment in history. As the summer of 1944 approached, the Allied forces were poised to launch a significant offensive in Western Europe, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the German forces were well aware of their movements. The intelligence reports suggested that the enemy had fortified key positions, anticipating the impending invasion at Normandy. In response, the Allies recognized the need for a strategy that would not only disrupt the German military's expectations, but also sow confusion in their ranks. It was within this context that a unique initiative emerged, blending the talents of artists and military strategists to create a visual illusion, what would later be known as the Ghost Army. The core of this operation was rooted in the creative genius of artist and designer Bill Blass, along with a diverse group of other artists, including filmmakers, sculptors, and actors, all assembled under the umbrella of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. This unit, often referred to as the Ghost Army, was unlike any other deployed during the war. Their mission was not direct combat, but rather deceptive warfare, relying on the element of surprise and the power of perception. Using their artistic skills, they were tasked with creating inflatable tanks, fake artillery, and elaborate sound systems that would mimic the sounds of an army on the move. Initially, it seems improbable that mere artists could significantly influence the tide of war. Yet the leadership of the Ghost Army understood a fundamental truth about warfare. Perception often dictated reality. As they meticulously crafted their inflatable tanks, designed to look like Sherman tanks from a distance, they were aware that the impact of their creations depended on their ability to convince the German forces that a massive cavalry was on the verge of advancing. To amplify this illusion, they employed sound equipment that simulated the noises of troops marching, vehicles rumbling, and artillery firing, creating a convincing auditory landscape. The importance of this deception was underscored by a pivotal moment in the days leading up to the Normandy invasion. As the Ghost Army prepared to execute their largest operation, they were tasked with diverting attention from the real landing sites. The team deployed their inflatable tanks and sound systems near the town of St. Lo, drawing German troops away from the beaches of Omaha and Utah. This tactic was not merely a trick, it was a carefully orchestrated response to the intelligence gathered from the front lines. As German commanders redirected their forces to confront what they believed to be a significant Allied threat, the true invasion unfolded at a different front. The stark contrast between the artistic nature of the Ghost Army's operation and the grim realities of war created a surreal atmosphere during the mission. Soldiers who had been trained for combat now found themselves in a world defined by creativity, where the line between art and warfare blurred. Amidst the chaos, moments of levity emerged, as the artists joked about their creations. They painted faces on their inflatable tanks, gave their fake artillery humorous names, and lamented the absurdity of their situation. Yet beneath the laughter lay a palpable tension. As they understood the real stakes of their charade, lives hung in the balance, and their success could determine the outcome of a pivotal campaign. As the days turned into nights, the Ghost Army executed a series of operations that showcased their ingenuity and adaptability. They used camouflage techniques that artfully blended their fake units into the landscape and engaged in a form of theater that extended beyond mere deception. The artists choreographed movements and strategies that mimicked genuine military maneuvers, ensuring that their feigned presence maintained the illusion of a formidable force. This level of planning required not only artistic talent, but also a keen understanding of military tactics as they navigated the complex landscape of wartime deception. The culmination of their efforts came with the successful diversion of substantial German forces away from the Normandy landings. The intelligence gathered post-invasion indicated that thousands of German troops had been misled by the Ghost Army's elaborate ruse. Reports later confirmed that the German commanders, believing they faced a significant assault elsewhere, hesitated to react decisively when the true invasion struck on June 6, 1944. The art of deception had proven remarkably effective. An army of artists had helped to alter the course of history. Though the Ghost Army operated in relative obscurity during their active years, their contributions remained critical to the success of the Allied campaign. The operation highlighted an essential characteristic of warfare: the ability to disrupt the enemy's plans through innovation and creativity. It also underscored a deeper truth about human nature: the power of imagination to outmaneuver brute strength. As the war progressed, the artistic members of the unit continued to leverage their skills, integrating elements of theater and spectacle to create confusion in the minds of their adversaries. In the aftermath of the war, the significance of the Ghost Army's contributions became overshadowed by larger, more conventional narratives of heroism and valor. Yet, as history has shown, the fusion of art and strategy on the battlefield provided a unique framework for understanding how creativity can impact conflict. The artists' efforts serve as a poignant reminder that sometimes the most profound victories arise not from sheer force, but from the clever manipulation of perception, a truth that continues to resonate in military and artistic circles alike. As the summer of 1944 approached, the stakes of the war reached a fever pitch in Europe. Allied forces had gained a foothold in Normandy, but the German forces were not yet defeated. In the midst of this turmoil, a cohort of artists, engineers and soldiers, collectively known as the Ghost Army, began to devise a series of deceptive strategies that would alter the course of the conflict in ways that transcended conventional warfare. At the center of this audacious plan stood Ralph Ingersoll, a painter-turned-military planner who understood that the real battle was not merely one of might, but of perception. With his background in the arts, Ingersoll approached warfare with an unconventional ethos, blending creativity with military strategy in an effort to trick the enemy. The Ghost Army was initially conceived out of necessity. As the Allies prepared for their advance into France, they faced a pressing need to mislead German forces regarding their true strength and intentions. Ingersoll's vision for a unit that could use visual and oral deception took shape as he assembled a team of artists, designers, and sound engineers. It was as if the very fabric of art could be woven into the tapestry of warfare. They created inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces, which were not mere replicas, but symbols of an elaborate ruse. Each piece was carefully designed to mimic the silhouettes of real machinery under the dim light of dusk, casting shadows that would evoke a sense of dread and urgency in the minds of the German commanders observing from afar. In late June, as Allied forces began to push deeper into occupied France, the Ghost Army sprang into action. They deployed their inflatable vehicles and sound equipment to simulate the movement and presence of a large-scale military unit. The team used a combination of recordings of truck engines and other mechanized sounds to create the illusion of a substantial force. In a series of carefully orchestrated maneuvers, they established fake camps, complete with the sounds of soldiers going about their daily routines, all designed to mislead German reconnaissance units. These distractions were intended to divert attention from the actual troop movements taking place elsewhere, particularly in the critical hours leading up to Operation Cobra. As the deception unfolded, the impact of the Ghost Army became evident. German intelligence, unable to discern the reality from the ruse, began to overestimate the strength of the Allied forces in certain areas. This miscalculation proved fortuitous for the Allied command, allowing them to execute their strategies with fewer obstacles. Ingersoll and his team realized that their creations were not just visual stimuli, but rather psychological tools capable of shaping the enemy's beliefs and decisions. Through artifice, they altered the battlefield, demonstrating how perception often holds the greater power in warfare. However, deception in war was not merely a game of artistic prowess. It required a rigorous understanding of the enemy's mindset, and Ralph Ingersoll excelled in this regard. He studied patterns of thought and anticipated how the German forces would react to the vast array of sounds and images his team produced. The artists, who had initially come from backgrounds in fine art and theatre, transformed the chaos of war into a stage for their illusions. The inflatable tanks were more than just rubber. They became vessels of uncertainty, emphasizing the vulnerability of an enemy grappling with figments of imagination rather than reality. Ingersoll's Ghost Army operated in the shadows, often undertaking their missions under the cover of night. Still, the weight of their accomplishments inspired a sense of camaraderie among the artists and soldiers. Their shared purpose fostered a bond that transcended their personal backgrounds. Painters, sculptors, and sound technicians united by a singular goal of deception. The power of collective creativity became apparent, and while their work went largely unrecognized at the time, it would later be celebrated as a testament to the ingenuity of human spirit against adversity. As the days passed, the Ghost Army completed a series of successful operations, including the ruse that culminated in the liberation of towns like Saint-Lô. The effectiveness of their deceptions did not go unnoticed in the higher echelons of command. Despite the gravity of the situation, Ingersoll and his team retained a sense of humor, often referring to their inflatable creations as tanks made of air. This playful dismissal of their elaborate machinations spoke to a deeper truth. They were not only engaged in a battle against external forces, but also against the looming spectre of despair that a prolonged conflict can foster. By August 1944, the psychological impact of the Ghost Army was evident. German troops, confused and misled by the elaborate deceptions, found themselves caught in a web of uncertainty. The Allies were able to exploit these miscalculations, leading to victories that would accelerate the liberation of France. The significance of the Ghost Army lay not only in their tactical successes, but also in the revelation that art and creativity could serve as powerful instruments within the machinery of war. The careful choreography of deception illustrated how the imagination could bend the fabric of reality itself. As the campaign advanced, Ingersoll and his cohorts recognized that their efforts were reshaping the narrative of the war. However, they remained grounded, acutely aware that the success of their operations did not diminish the human cost of conflict. In their own way, the Ghost Army encapsulated the belief that even in the darkest of times, hope and innovation could rise above despair. The artists who had once painted for pleasure now wielded their brushes against tyranny, transforming the canvas of a battlefield into a stage where illusion triumphed over brute strength. As the winter of 1944 approached, the pressure on the Allies mounted. The German forces were bolstered by reinforcements, and the Battle of the Bulge loomed on the horizon, threatening to push through the Ardennes and split the Allied front. In this precarious moment, the efforts of the Ghost Army became all the more critical. With deception as their primary weapon, the members of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops adapted their tactics, augmenting their already sophisticated ruse. They understood that the stakes had escalated, and every moment became a race against time to mislead their adversaries. Among the artists and soldiers, creativity thrived under pressure. The unit, composed of diverse talents, painters, sound engineers, and even a theatrical director, was tasked with crafting an elaborate facade that could rival the machinations of military force. The creation of inflatable tanks and vehicles had initially seemed like a whimsical endeavor, but it had evolved into a serious art form with clear military implications. Each piece of equipment was designed not merely to mimic the look of armored vehicles, but to reflect the strategic movements of the Allies, projecting a continuous image of strength where it could easily be perceived as weakness. While the artists meticulously painted the deceptive devices, they also crafted soundscapes that emulated the distant rumble of artillery and the clatter of troop movements. The sound engineers employed a range of techniques to ensure the auditory illusion would be as convincing as the visual. They recorded sounds of military activity and used speakers to broadcast these sounds across the battlefield. The clever use of acoustics could confuse the enemy, leading them to believe they were facing a much larger force than was truly present. This multi-sensory approach, visual and auditory, was a testament to the innovative spirit that defined the Ghost Army. In the field, the Ghost Army executed their plans with precision. Camouflage was paramount, as they blended their inflatable tanks into the surrounding environment, ensuring that the sunlight caught the edges just right, making them indistinguishable from real vehicles at a distance. In one instance, they set up a simulated camp complete with tents, vehicles, and even the appearance of soldiers engaged in everyday activities. The sight alone deterred German forces from probing deeper into their positions, as they assumed they faced a robust Allied force prepared for engagement. This interplay of perception and reality became a central theme in their operations, reflecting the duality of war itself. But the Ghost Army was not without its challenges. Their operations relied heavily on intelligence about enemy movements and morale. They needed to be one step ahead, predicting the decisions of the German generals. Each operation was meticulously planned and executed. However, the stakes of failure were immense. The artists and soldiers learned to adapt quickly to changing circumstances, improvising when necessary. If a plan was compromised, they would shift their tactics, utilizing the surrounding landscape and existing infrastructure to continue their deceptive maneuvers. This adaptability became their hallmark, allowing them to remain one step ahead of the enemy's understanding. As the days passed, the impact of their deceptions became increasingly apparent. Reports began to filter in from higher command, indicating that German forces were making strategic decisions based on the Ghost Army's fabrications. They had convinced the enemy that the Allies had amassed significant resources in certain areas, thus redirecting German troops from advancing to positions that could have been detrimental to the Allied effort. The symbolism of art and deception converged here, revealing how creativity and intellect could sometimes wield more power than brute force on the battlefield. However, all was not without risk. The Ghost Army's operations were classified, and if their efforts were discovered, the consequences could be grave, not just for the members of the unit, but for the broader Allied strategy. The pressure was palpable. They were engaged in an elaborate game of cat and mouse. The stakes involved not only personal safety, but also the potential loss of the broader vision of victory. As they painted, built, and broadcasted, each member carried the weight of historical significance on their shoulders, knowing that their actions could alter the course of the war. The creative tensions within the unit, while exhilarating, also sparked debates about the ethical implications of their work. Some members questioned whether manipulating the truth to such extremes was morally right, even in a time of war. Yet, amid these conversations, a consensus emerged. The greater good demanded such cunning stratagems. They were united by a common purpose, realizing that their art was a means of preserving lives, both their own and those of countless soldiers on the front lines. This realization imbued their work with a deeper meaning, transforming mere deception into a noble act of patriotism. As the winter chill enveloped the landscape, the Ghost Army prepared for their next major operation. Every detail was reviewed, from the construction of inflatable vehicles to the precise timing of sound broadcasts. Whatever challenges lay ahead, one truth resonated among them. In a world where reality could often blur with illusion, their unique talents were not only a matter of survival, but also a testament to human creativity and resilience. In this delicate balance between artifice and authenticity, they found purpose, ready to engage once again in the grand theater of war, where deception could ultimately lead to triumph. As the spring of 1944 approached, the atmosphere in the Allied camp was fraught with tension and anticipation. The stakes were undeniable. The success of the forthcoming invasion hinged on a delicate balance of deception and valor. It was here, amid the whispers of strategy and the rustle of military uniforms, that the Ghost Army, a collection of artists, designers, and sound engineers, prepared to wield their unique skills against the German forces. They had been tasked with crafting a visual and auditory illusion so compelling that it could obscure the true movements of Allied troops. Among them was Captain William V. Bill McGowan, a skilled painter and former advertising executive whose creativity would soon become a cornerstone of this covert operation. McGowan and his compatriots operated under a cloak of secrecy, immersing themselves in the art of deception with a fervor befitting their respective talents. They were acutely aware that their work was not merely about creating false images. It was a matter of life and death. The landscape of war demanded precision and artistry, and every detail mattered. They employed inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces, laboriously crafting these decoys from rubber and canvas. With an eye for realism that bordered on the obsessive, they painted shadows, highlights, and weathering effects, making their creations indistinguishable from genuine military hardware at a distance. The inflatable tanks, while pivotal to their ruse, also carried a symbolic weight. In a world dominated by the grotesque realities of combat, these artfully constructed facades represented a glimmer of hope, a kind of defiance against the grim machinery of war. As McGowan and his team worked tirelessly, they infused their creations with a sense of purpose that transcended mere camouflage. Each fake vehicle stood as a testament to the power of human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming adversity. The artists were, in essence, soldiers of a different kind, armed not with weapons, but with wit and imagination. Their artistry was intended to project strength while shrouding vulnerable positions, a strategic duality that would soon play a critical role in the Allied campaign. In conjunction with the visual deception, the team devised intricate soundscapes to accompany their inflatable creations. Using loudspeakers and recordings, they mimicked the sounds of troop movements, clanking metal, rumbling engines, and the distant echo of marching feet. This auditory camouflage served to reinforce the illusion, tricking the senses of those who might attempt to ascertain the true state of affairs on the battlefield. The German forces, equipped with their own intelligence apparatus, would struggle to distinguish between the fabricated cacophony and the realities of the unfolding war. McGowan found a certain satisfaction in this. The art of deception had transformed into a formidable weapon, capable of withholding the harsh truths that lay at the heart of warfare. As the date for the invasion drew nearer, the Ghost Army became increasingly involved in operations across the European theater. They conducted elaborate ruses to mislead enemy forces about Allied troop placements and intentions, particularly during the build-up to the D-Day landings in Normandy. The operation's complexity required coordination among various branches of the military, and McGowan's team became adept at adapting their strategies in response to evolving threats. The Ghost Army even received support from intelligence officers, who provided insights into enemy movements and perceptions, allowing the artists to fine-tune their illusions for maximum impact. In a noteworthy operation known as Operation Quicksilver, the Ghost Army was tasked with misleading the German military ahead of the Normandy landings by creating the illusion of a large-scale invasion force poised to strike at the Pas de Calais. The operation involved deploying inflatable tanks and vehicles to the area while employing the sound of an approaching armada. The success of Quicksilver hinged on the belief that the German forces would be diverted, misallocating their resources and attention away from the actual landing zones. As Allied troops prepared for their assault on the beaches of Normandy, it became increasingly clear that the Ghost Army's efforts were an indispensable part of the larger fabric of military strategy. The impact of those misdirection efforts began to unfold in the days leading up to the landings, as German intelligence intercepted false reports of troop movements that had been deliberately orchestrated by McGowan and his colleagues. The diversion proved effective, as the German command remained convinced that the primary attack would strike at Calais. This misjudgment allowed Allied forces to achieve an element of surprise when they landed on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. While the cost of the invasion was immense, the early success was a testament to the effectiveness of the Ghost Army's contributions, demonstrating the critical nature of deception in warfare. Yet even as the Allies celebrated their initial victories, the reality of war persisted like an unyielding shadow. In the weeks following D-Day, the Ghost Army continued to operate behind enemy lines, their artistry not only a means of deception, but also a conduit for camaraderie among the soldiers. They became known not just for their inflatable tanks, but for their ability to uplift morale, using humor and creativity to forge bonds in the harrowing environment of war. Thus, in the face of destruction and despair, the Ghost Army emerged as a unique symbol of resilience and hope, transforming the bleak landscape of battle into a canvas of possibility. Their contributions marked an indelible chapter in the annals of American military history, reminding us that even in the darkest moments, creativity can illuminate paths previously unimagined. The spring of 1944 brought palpable tension to the European theatre. Allied forces were meticulously planning the liberation of Europe, culminating in what would become known as D-Day. Meanwhile, a group of artists, designers and soldiers were diligently preparing a covert operation that would sow confusion within the ranks of German forces. This ensemble, known as the Ghost Army, was an audacious blend of creativity and military cunning, tasked with creating illusions so grand that they would baffle the enemy. Among them was the American artist Ellsworth Kelly, who had been drafted into the service but brought with him an invaluable skill set rooted in visual arts. Armed with the expertise of their civilian backgrounds, the Ghost Army turned to deception as their most potent weapon. Kelly and his fellow soldiers began by fabricating life-size inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery. These deceptive structures were meticulously crafted from rubberized material and painted with detail, all to mimic the real machinery that was essential for any military campaign. The artists understood that the human eye could be easily tricked, and they harnessed this notion like a brush to canvas. Each inflatable was designed not just to be seen, but to create a narrative in the minds of the viewers, reinforcing the illusion of a larger, more formidable presence. The operation was not just about creating visual distractions, it was about manipulating sound too. The Ghost Army employed loudspeakers to broadcast the sounds of vehicle engines, troop movements, and artillery fire, augmenting the illusion of an overwhelming force. The subtle interplay of sight and sound was a testament to the artists' ingenuity, crafting a theatrical performance on the battlefield. They staged these deceptions strategically, often in areas where the German forces were known to be observing, ensuring that every sound and sight operated in concert to generate maximal confusion. It was a high-stakes game of chess, played with audacity and art. In the face of imminent danger, the Ghost Army's actions not only served a tactical purpose, but also acted as a psychological balm for their own troops. Amid the chaos of war, the creative endeavors of the ensemble provided a momentary escape, a shared purpose that transcended the grim realities of combat. During their missions, camaraderie blossomed as laughter and artistic collaboration fostered an unbreakable bond. The act of creating, whether inflating a faux tank or choreographing sounds, became an outlet for stress, a rebellion against the chaos that surrounded them. It was in these moments that the soldiers became artists. They crafted not just illusions, but also resilience. As the Ghost Army executed its plans across various fronts, the effectiveness of their deceptions became increasingly evident. Reports trickled in, suggesting that German intelligence was misled by the faux armaments and movements. On one notable occasion, in June 1944, the Ghost Army was deployed near the town of St. Lo, where they created the illusion of a massive force preparing for an attack. The German command, deceived by the elaborate display, misallocated their resources, redirecting troops to counter an imagined threat. This reallocation allowed Allied forces to exploit other vulnerabilities, hastening their advance and significantly diminishing the strength of German defenses. The aftermath of such operations was a testament to the potency of perception in warfare. The ability to manipulate reality, however temporary, highlighted the fragile line between illusion and truth, a theme prevalent throughout the war. In the broader context, the Ghost Army's endeavors symbolized a shift away from conventional warfare towards psychological tactics, emphasizing that battles were as much fought in the mind as on the battlefield. The artists and soldiers engaged in a new form of combat, one that relied on creativity rather than sheer firepower, embodying a philosophy deeply rooted in American ingenuity and resourcefulness. However, success bred challenges. As the war progressed, the Ghost Army faced increasing scrutiny. Some military leaders questioned the effectiveness of their operations, advocating for more traditional forms of engagement. The creative endeavors that had brought them acclaim within their ranks also drew skepticism from higher command, who viewed the unconventional methods with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. To maintain their legitimacy, the Ghost Army had to demonstrate tangible results, an irony considering their success was inherently tied to the intangible art of deception. The culmination of their efforts peaked when they prepared for the liberation of Paris. As Allied troops closed in, the Ghost Army executed one of their most audacious operations. They orchestrated a series of complex deceptions that not only aimed to mislead German forces, but also to inspire hope among the French populace. The spectacle of phony battalions marching through the countryside, combined with strategically placed noise, created a surreal yet invigorating atmosphere for those who witnessed it. This act of artifice not only served a military purpose, but also became a symbol of liberation, infusing the air with anticipation as the true liberators approached. With the war drawing ever closer to its conclusion, the Ghost Army faded into the shadows, their legacy woven into the complex tapestry of the Allied victory. The artists and soldiers returned to their lives, often underappreciated in the annals of military history. Yet their contributions remained palpable, a reminder that creativity can emerge from the darkest circumstances. The Ghost Army, through their illusions and artistry, had altered not just the course of battles, but had also left an indelible mark on the narrative of warfare itself, one that would resonate in the minds of future strategists long after the final shots were fired. As the weeks turned into months in the spring of 1944, the Ghost Army's efforts intensified amidst the backdrop of a rapidly escalating war in Europe. The Allies were preparing for Operation Overlord, the monumental D-Day invasion of Normandy, and the need for deception had reached a fevered pitch. The artists and soldiers who made up the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops were not just a secret unit. They had become a vital component in the larger strategy to mislead German forces about the true strength and intentions of Allied forces. With every successful operation, they began to appreciate the power of art as a weapon, transforming mundane materials into instruments of survival. The heart of the Ghost Army lay within its carefully orchestrated operations that entailed more than just inflatable tanks and fake artillery. It involved a creative synergy of sound, sight, and sheer audacity. The unit utilized sophisticated sound equipment to create the illusion of troop movements. Recordings of tank engines, troop chatter, and distant explosions reverberated through the air, simulating the presence of an army where none existed. This auditory deception, combined with the visual fabrications, aimed to mislead German intelligence. It was a bold, yet calculated strategy, a delicate balance of illusion and reality, where artifice became synonymous with warfare. In a daring operation near the French town of Saint-Lô, the unit executed their most ambitious deception yet. They positioned their inflatable tanks and trucks in a carefully crafted formation on a hill, overlooking the real Allied positions, all while broadcasting sounds of an active military camp. As the sun set, casting shadows over the faux battalion, the nearby German scouts were drawn in by the ruse. They reported back to their commanders, convinced that a formidable force lay in wait. The power of perception became an undeniable force on the battlefield, confirming how malleable the human mind could be when confronted with an illusion that tugged at the threads of belief. This illusion was not without its risks. The Ghost Army operated on the razor's edge of danger, aware that if discovered, they would likely be met with swift retribution. Yet the very nature of their work fostered a unique camaraderie among the artists and soldiers. Each was acutely aware that their survival depended not just on their individual creativity, but on their collective ability to maintain the illusion. Their bond grew stronger as they shared stories, laughter, and fears, knowing well that the stakes were higher than life or death. They fought for the ideals of freedom and the very fabric of democracy. The psychological warfare waged by the Ghost Army extended beyond the battlefield. Their operations served as a poignant reminder of the power of imagination in times of despair. Just as they crafted deceptions, they also fostered hope. Hope that came from the belief that their actions could shape the outcome of the war. This duality of art as a weapon and a beacon of hope became an intrinsic part of the soldiers' worldview, transforming their grim reality into a canvas painted with possibility. The Ghost Army became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to adapt and overcome. As the Allies marched towards the liberation of France, the Ghost Army's efforts played an integral role in diverting German forces away from the actual landings. The meticulous planning and execution of their operations allowed real troops to land at Normandy with less immediate opposition. Each fabricated division and sound echoed far beyond the battlefield, rippling through the ranks of the German command structure, fostering confusion and fear. This misdirection was not merely a tactical maneuver. It imbued the soldiers with a sense of purpose. Each unit's creativity contributed meaningfully to the war effort, shaping the narrative of their own legacy. The operations of the Ghost Army culminated in a series of increasingly elaborate deceptions, but it was not solely about misleading the enemy. It was also an artistic endeavor, a melding of creative expression with military necessity. Each inflatable tank, every painted canvas, served as a reminder that art could transcend its traditional boundaries, becoming a lifeline during a time of despair. For the artists involved, it was a transformative experience that elevated their work from mere representation to an act of defiance against tyranny. As the war drew to a close, the Ghost Army transitioned from being a hidden force to one of historical significance. Their clever deceptions and audacious maneuvers would later be celebrated as a testament to the ingenuity of the human spirit. However, the lessons they imparted about perception, creativity, and resilience would endure far beyond the confines of their military service. They learned that even in the darkest of times, humanity could conjure beauty and hope from the depths of strife. This ethereal truth became their legacy, one that would echo throughout history as a bold reminder of the power of art and imagination in the face of adversity. In the years following the war, the contributions of the Ghost Army were largely overlooked, buried under the weight of more visible military actions. Yet as archives opened and stories resurfaced, the collective memory of these artists and soldiers began to emerge. Their legacy served as a rich tapestry of bravery and creativity, a reminder that sometimes the most effective weapons are not forged in steel, but crafted with the heart and mind. Their story prompted a re-evaluation of how warfare is waged and the role of art within it, challenging conventional understandings of military history and the human experience. As the spring of 1945 approached, the Ghost Army's operations took on an increasingly urgent tone. With the Allied forces pushing deeper into German-held territory, the stakes were higher than ever. This unit, comprised of artists, sound engineers, and other creative talents, found its role evolving into a critical psychological weapon against the German forces. The creation of inflatable tanks, trucks, and other military decoys had been innovative, but the need to adapt to the evolving battlefield situation became paramount. The success of their deception relied not only on the artistry of their creations, but also on the strategic application of sound and light to amplify the illusion. One particular operation in April involved a meticulously planned deception near the town of Celles, Belgium. The Ghost Army was tasked with diverting the attention of German forces from an imminent Allied attack on a different front. The unit set to work with fervor, constructing dozens of inflatable tanks and artillery pieces that would appear to be a formidable force from a distance. The artists worked long hours, often late into the night, carefully painting the decoys with exaggerated details to reflect the latest military designs. They understood that the German commanders were keen observers, trained to spot any signs of deceit. This knowledge fueled their determination to create an almost lifelike representation of an armored division. On the day of the operation, a carefully orchestrated plan unfolded. As night fell, the Ghost Army deployed their inflatable armaments, discreetly positioning them on a ridge overlooking a valley. They then activated an array of sound effects amplified by powerful speakers, simulating the sounds of military vehicles moving into position. The cacophony of rumbling engines and distant artillery fire mingled with the eerie quiet of the evening, creating an atmosphere that would lead any observer to believe that a substantial Allied force was preparing to launch an offensive. Their ingenuity was a testament to the power of illusion, manipulating the senses to achieve a tactical advantage. Meanwhile, intelligence reports indicated the German command was indeed taking note of the seemingly bolstered Allied presence. Panicked communications flowed from various original fronts as the Germans rushed to reinforce positions that were, in truth, facing a ghostly army. The psychological impact of this deception was profound. German commanders, misled by what they perceived as a genuine threat, requested reinforcements, diverting troops from essential operations elsewhere. This diversion played a crucial role in facilitating the success of the actual Allied advance. The deception not only showcased the Ghost Army's creativity, but also underscored the significance of psychological warfare in modern combat. As the campaign progressed, the Ghost Army found itself involved in increasingly daring operations, with missions extending to the use of faux tanks and sound effects to confuse German air reconnaissance. The artists, now seasoned in their craft, were adept at manipulating perceptions, creating illusions that would hold even when under scrutiny. They painted entire mock-up encampments and devised elaborate scenarios that suggested an overwhelming number of troops preparing for battle. Each new project brought fresh challenges, yet the camaraderie among the men grew stronger, unified by their shared purpose and the growing recognition of their contributions to the war effort. However, the toll of constant deception weighed heavily on the soldiers. They grappled with the disquieting truth that their efforts, built on falsehoods, were essential to saving lives on both sides of the conflict. The moral complexities of their mission haunted many of them, leading to rich discussions around campfires where they wrestled with the duality of their roles as artists and soldiers. They were proud of their artistry, yet some found it unsettling that their greatest creations were designed solely to mislead and manipulate. This internal conflict became a recurring theme, reflecting the broader struggles faced by those engaged in a war defined by totality and the resulting human cost. As the war drew to a close in Europe, the Ghost Army's final missions took on a sense of urgency. They were tasked with misleading the German forces in anticipation of the Allied victory, culminating in a grand deception during the final days of the conflict. Utilizing the knowledge they had acquired, they set the stage for one last elaborate ruse, which featured not only inflatable tanks and sound effects, but also entire mock divisions that would lead German commanders to believe that a large-scale assault was imminent from multiple fronts. This final act would encapsulate the spirit of the Ghost Army, their ability to create beauty and terror from nothingness, and their unwavering commitment to their country, even while embracing the artist's penchant for illusion. As the Allied forces celebrated victory in Europe in May 1945, the Ghost Army remained a shadowy figure in the backdrop of history. Few realized the extent of their contributions, even as the world began to reckon with the devastation of 6 long years of war. The men returned home, carrying with them tales of artistry, deception, and an unquenchable sense of duty. In the years that followed, their stories faded into obscurity, overshadowed by the larger narrative of the war. Yet for those who served within the ranks of the Ghost Army, their legacy was not merely one of ruse, but also of creativity and resilience in the face of unimaginable odds. The inflatable tanks, the sounds of an army that never was, these echoes of a hidden chapter in history would eventually find their place in the broader tapestry of American art and ingenuity during a time of crisis. As we reflect on the audacious endeavors of the Ghost Army, it becomes evident that creativity, when wielded with purpose, can transcend the conventional bounds of warfare. The ingenuity of the American artist and his comrades not only served as a tactical deception, but also illuminated the profound impact of art and imagination in moments of dire conflict. This narrative invites us to consider the power of collaboration across disciplines, how artists, soldiers, and strategists united to craft a narrative that altered the course of history. Such stories remind us that the essence of conflict extends beyond the battlefield, encompassing the psychological and emotional landscapes that shape human experience. In honoring the legacy of those who participated in this unique campaign, we are called to recognize our own roles in shaping narratives today. As we navigate the complexities of contemporary global challenges, we must ask ourselves how creativity and innovation can be harnessed to challenge misinformation and foster understanding. The lessons of the Ghost Army resonate far beyond their time, urging us to reflect on the ways we can all contribute to a more compassionate world where truth and art intersect to inspire change.